Let's have your thoughts on this. Should Prince Harry spend more time in the UK? 0207 862 2222. That's our next subject. The Duke of Sussex is reportedly hoping to return to the UK every few months following a successful visit in July, with plans to spend more time with his family, carry out charity work and support the Invictus Games. Harry currently lives in California with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and their children Archie and Lilibet, Prince and Princess. But during an extended stay in the UK last month, the Sussexes and their children were hosted by the King and Queen at Highgrove for a private family occasion. So what about that? The plan to come back? What do you think, if it exists?
Absolutely. I would wholeheartedly agree with this. The royal family needs someone like Harry, who has a wonderful natural charm, is marvellous with people, who does fantastic charity work, and genuinely loves doing it and wants to do it. He and Meghan were hounded out. We won't go into the reasons for that now, but they were hounded out by the press and forced by the palace. And I think if he can only enhance what we have. If you look at what's left, if you look at the palace balcony up for a fly past these days, what's left? I mean,
Well, you've got the young ones.
But they're not on stream yet, are they?
No,
They're only a few years old.
So you've got, but I'm talking about now.
Yeah,
so you've got Anne's just turned 76, and thank God for Anne, because she soldiers on.
I agree.
Charles, sadly, is getting older, like we all are, but has still treatment for cancer.
Yeah.
And who else is there? I mean,
the one we can't mention. No, then there's Edward.
Who wants to see him?
Sussex gang. Because Nina Myskow just walked into a royal debate, looked at the entire Harry situation from a completely different angle. And frankly, while some people were sitting there explaining why Prince Harry can't be trusted, Nina basically said, what if we're looking at this completely backwards? What if the question isn't, what if the real question is? Because, according to Nina, this isn't some washed-up prince desperately looking for relevance. This is a man with, and here comes the part that really got me. She pointed out that the royal family simply doesn't have an endless supply of people available to carry out public duties. In other words, Harry is capable. Harry has experience. Harry knows the job. Harry can connect with people. And Harry already has a cause-driven public identity. So why are we pretending that his existence is somehow a problem to be solved? And Sussex gang, neither am I. But before we splash the truth all over this conversation, let me make one thing clear. I'm not suggesting Harry should march back into Buckingham Palace tomorrow morning, grab a diary and announce, no, that's not the point. The point is whether there could be a in which Harry contributes to public life without pretending the past never happened. And that is where this conversation gets deliciously interesting. Let's start with something incredibly obvious. The royal family has a workload problem. There are only so many working royals, and there are only so many hours in the day. Royal engagements aren't just waving from balconies. They're hospitals, schools, charities, veterans, community organisations, international visits, national ceremonies, fundraising, patronages, thousands upon thousands of people expecting representation. So when Nina says Harry could, she's not talking about adding another decorative ornament to the royal balcony. She's talking about adding an experienced public servant. And that's a very different proposition. Because Harry already knows the machinery. He understands the expectations. He understands what it means to walk into a room where everyone is watching. He understands the security implications, the press attention, the protocol, the endless cameras, the endless commentary. He was raised inside this world. And here's the kicker. You can teach somebody protocol. You can teach somebody how to shake hands. You can teach somebody which door to walk through. But you can't manufacture years of lived experience. And Nina clearly sees that as an asset. Now let's talk about something the royal commentary machine doesn't always like discussing. Because Nina specifically highlighted Harry's natural charm, and I thought, well, because charm matters, especially in public service. You can have the perfect suit, the perfect speech, the perfect schedule, the perfect palace briefing. But if you walk into a room and make people feel like they're being processed through a human conveyor belt, you've got a problem. Harry has always had an ability to connect with people in a relatively relaxed way. And whether people like him or not, that doesn't suddenly disappear. The man can talk to people, he can joke, he can listen, he can engage, and he has demonstrated that, particularly through his work with veterans and young people. That's not insignificant. In fact, it's precisely the kind of quality that can make somebody effective at charitable work. And this is where Nina's argument becomes almost annoyingly logical. Because if you're a monarchy that wants to demonstrate relevance to ordinary people, then Nina highlighted something else. Harry genuinely appears to care about charitable work. And let's stop for a second, because this is important. Royal service isn't supposed to be about celebrity. It's supposed to be about service. That's literally the point. And Harry has spent years building a public profile around causes that matter to him. Veterans, mental health, young people, sport, community. The Invictus Games alone demonstrates how closely his identity has become connected to service personnel and veterans. So perhaps Harry's strongest argument for a future role isn't. Maybe that's a much stronger argument. Because titles don't automatically make someone effective. Work does. Commitment does. Consistency does. Connection does. And Nina apparently sees those qualities in Harry. Now, we come to the part that makes this conversation considerably more uncomfortable. Nina didn't just praise Harry. She challenged the story of how he left. She argued that Harry and Meghan were by the press and faced pressure from the palace. Now, obviously, people have different interpretations of what happened. But here's what cannot seriously be disputed. Their relationship became a permanent news cycle. Their clothes were analysed, their body language was analysed, their family relationships were analysed, their decisions were analysed, their every move became content. And eventually the relationship between the Sussexes, the British media, and sections of the institution became deeply strained. So when someone says, yes, he did, but that's only half the sentence. Because the next question should be, and that's the question Nina was brave enough to put back on the table. Because if Harry left because he wanted independence, that's one story. If he left because he believed the environment had become intolerable, that's another. And if it was a combination of personal, institutional, and media pressures, then the story becomes even more complicated. Real life usually is. Now, let's talk about the panellists who expressed distrust. I understand why some people say it. Harry has spoken publicly. He's written a memoir. He's discussed family conflict. He's made accusations. He's taken legal action against media organisations. So yes, somebody can reasonably ask. Fair question. But here's the question I would ask in return. Because that's where this debate gets silly. You don't have to go from to overnight. That's not how human relationships work. Trust can be rebuilt gradually, through behaviour, through boundaries, through consistency, through private conversations, through time. And perhaps if Harry ever did increase his involvement in Britain, that could be precisely how it happens. Not some dramatic royal comeback, not a balcony reunion, not a glossy magazine cover, just one engagement, then another, one charity, then another, one successful collaboration, then another. Let the actions do the talking. Because maybe Harry doesn't actually need to return in the way people imagine. Why does everybody assume that coming back means becoming the old Harry? Why can't it mean becoming a Harry who lives primarily in the United States? A Harry who maintains his independence? A Harry who protects his family? A Harry who doesn't surrender his boundaries, but who can still say, now that sounds much more realistic, and perhaps much healthier. Because reconciliation doesn't require pretending that nothing happened. It requires accepting that something happened and deciding what comes next. What Nina did was shift the entire conversation. The panel was essentially looking backward, and Nina looked forward. That is a completely different question. And frankly, Sussex gang. Because you can spend another 20 years arguing over. You can spend another 20 years arguing over Oprah. You can spend another 20 years arguing about palace briefings. You can spend another 20 years arguing about who said what to whom. Or you can ask, and there's something deliciously ironic here. For years we've been told Harry is irrelevant, that he's irrelevant to Britain, that he should stay in America, that nobody cares, that the monarchy has moved on. And yet, the moment somebody suggests Harry might return, television panels discuss it, newspapers speculate about it, commentators debate it, royal watchers analyse it, the public weighs in. So perhaps the uncomfortable truth is this, and perhaps that's exactly why his potential contribution makes people nervous. Because if Harry came back not as a rebellious royal, not as a family antagonist, but as a focused humanitarian, he could potentially change the conversation completely. Imagine Harry turning up to a veterans event. No palace drama, no family gossip, no endless briefing war, just Harry doing the work. Imagine him meeting young people, supporting veterans, working on mental health initiatives, supporting the Invictus community. Imagine the headlines, and imagine how much harder it becomes to maintain the idea that he's simply some disgruntled former royal hanging around the edges. Because suddenly, and that's exactly where Nina believes Harry is strongest. So perhaps Nina Myskow didn't actually defend Harry. Perhaps she did something far more interesting. She reminded people that behind all the headlines is a man with abilities, a man with experience, a man who can connect with people, a man who has demonstrated a commitment to causes he cares about, and yes, a man who has made mistakes. Because, let's be honest, nobody gets a lifetime exemption from mistakes simply because they're royal. But mistakes don't automatically erase someone's capacity to contribute. And they don't have to define the rest of somebody's life. So maybe the question shouldn't be, maybe it's, and perhaps even more importantly, Nina's answer appears to be yes. And I think that's why she shook the panel, because she wasn't trapped in the endless royal soap opera. She was looking at the practical reality. The monarchy needs people. Harry has experience, Harry has public appeal, Harry has charitable interests, Harry understands the institution, and whether some people like it or not. So, Sussex gang? Nina walked into that discussion and basically said, and honestly, maybe Harry never returns to royal duties. Maybe he does. Maybe there is some middle ground nobody has even seriously explored yet. But one thing is certain. You cannot build a future by endlessly fighting over the past. And if there is ever going to be reconciliation, it won't happen because everyone suddenly forgets. It will happen because somebody decides enough hostility, enough scorekeeping, enough turning every family disagreement into a national sporting event, enough pretending that reconciliation equals surrender. Sometimes reconciliation simply means, and if Harry can contribute meaningfully to Britain while maintaining the independence he fought so hard to establish, why shouldn't that possibility at least be discussed? Nina Myskow certainly thinks it should. and judging by the reaction. So now it's your turn. Do you think Nina was right? Could Harry actually strengthen the royal family if he spent more time in Britain? Or has the trust issue become too deep for that door ever to reopen? I want your opinion down below. And Sussex gang, if you enjoyed this truth splash, hit that notification bell and don't forget if you want to help us keep these conversations going. Because around here we don't just swallow the royal narrative whole. We question it, we turn it upside down. And sometimes Nina Myskow just shook the panel. Now let's see what happens when the Sussex gang starts talking.